Hi, I'm Sally and I'm going to talk to you about the very start of your breastfeeding journey and what to expect in those first few days. So I think the first thing to start with is colostrum, and that's the very first milk you produce right after you give birth. You'll recognise it by its characteristic orange-yellow colour, liquid gold some people call it. So what colostrum does is it begins to seal the gut lining in preparation for breast milk and for solid foods later on. This prevents germs and other unwanted substances from entering the bloodstream at a time when your baby is most vulnerable, by sealing the porous gut and stopping anything getting in. It's also got a laxative effect and clears meconium, which is your baby's first poos. They're quite thick and tar-like. This also helps to prevent jaundice, as the colostrum flushes out the excess bilirubin that causes jaundice. It contains, amongst other things, white blood cells, antibodies, immunoglobulins, and these will prime your baby's immune system and set them up for a healthy life. And it's produced in very, very small amounts. This can cause worry to some new parents in the early days, but just bear in mind that these little tiny amounts are perfectly tailored to your baby's needs. So colostrum's produced in these small amounts, which is perfect for your baby's tiny newborn stomach. It's really easily digestible and it's really gentle on their brand new digestive system. What this means, however, is that your baby will probably need to feed very frequently for those first few days. Sometimes they might not seem that interested on the first day. They might be sleepy still. They might not realise that they're here yet on the outside, But nature knows this, and nature knows that colostrum comes in those small amounts. And for this reason, babies in the last few weeks of pregnancy tend to lay down glycogen stores. Obviously, this might be different if your baby's born early or is poorly. So they lay down these glycogen stores, or a packed lunch, as I like to call it, to get you through those first few days. By around day 3, sometimes a little bit before, babies are starting to feel quite hungry. Nature wants this to happen, as hunger is your baby's motivation to feed. Often we speak to parents on day 3 and we hear that the baby's really ramped up their feeding. They've been on and off all night. I don't know if they're getting enough, these sorts of things is what we're hearing. But these really frequent feeds are serving a really important purpose. They're telling your body that your baby is ready for the next stage of milk. Every time your baby sucks and nuzzles at your breast, your prolactin levels rise. Prolactin helps with milk production, and levels are naturally higher at night, which is one of the reasons that babies feed a lot at night in those early days. There's also a hormone called oxytocin, and these levels also rise when you hold and feed your baby. Oxytocin is also known as the love hormone. It helps you fall in love with your baby and want to hold, stroke and protect them. And what it also does is it causes the lobules in the breast to contract, letting the milk down to the baby. Additionally, it increases circulation to the breast to release nutrients that are stored into the milk, and also keep your baby warm while they're at the breast. So lots of frequent peaks in those hormone levels in the early days of breastfeeding set up your milk supply and cause your milk to change or come in to be the more sort of mature milk, the milk that looks like the milk that we know rather than the colostrum. There might be long feeds, there might be short feeds, but they're still creating these peaks and switching on more milk producing cells. The frequency of those peaks, and therefore the feeds in the early days, is really important, as it means the hormones don't fall back to the normal levels. One of the most important things to remember as your breastfeeding journey starts, frequent feeds in the early days are not only normal, but they're necessary. Supplementing with formula at this time can mean that your baby misses out on several of these small feeds, and it can impact your supply, as your body will not receive as many signals to continue milk production. Remember, milk removal drives milk production. But also remember that breastfeeding isn't just about being hungry and having food. Being at the breast makes your baby feel safe. It's normal and natural for newborns to want to spend a lot of time at the breast, and it's really good for their brain development. But there'll be more on that a bit later. And while we're talking about the early days of feeding, it's definitely worth mentioning vitamin D. So vitamin D is only found in a few foods, such as oily fish and eggs. It's also added to some foods such as fat spreads and breakfast cereals, but it's difficult to get enough vitamin D from food alone. The main source of vitamin D is summer sunlight on our skin, but it's important to keep your child's skin safe in the sun. So it is recommended that babies from birth to 1 year of age who are being breastfed should be given a daily supplement containing 8.5 to 10 micrograms of vitamin D to make sure they get enough. This is whether or not you're taking a supplement containing vitamin D yourself. So quite a common concern that new parents have is breastfeeding going well? You know, you can't see what's going in. So how can you tell that breastfeeding is going well in the first few days? So following delivery, you'll be giving your baby's red book by the midwifery team at the hospital. Near the start, there's 2 breastfeeding assessments, one for around day 5 and one for around day 10 to 14. And that checklist in that assessment, if you go through that checklist yourself, if you're having concerns, it can provide you with some reassurance. So there's questions such as, is your baby having 8 or more feeds in 24 hours? Are the feeds lasting between 5 and 40 minutes? Has your baby got a normal skin tone? Are they waking for their feeds? Your baby is generally calm and relaxed when feeding and content after most feeds. Wet and dirty nappies, so these should increase up to 5 wet nappies and 2 dirty nappies by around day 5. It can vary on days 1 to 4, but again the details can be found in that checklist in your red book. Breastfeeding should be comfortable. Your nipples should be the same shape following the feed. They shouldn't look like pinched. And from around day 5 you should be able to hear your baby swallowing. And you know, if there's any of these things and you're thinking, well, I don't think that's quite the case, then it's worth seeking some further support from your midwife, your health visitor, or ourselves.